Man, look, I woke up seeing that post and I just shook my head, man. I said, here he go. 50 Cent is the super villain of the internet, dog. He really the Thanos of this rap game, I'm telling you. When that man get quiet, that's when you need to start praying.
The internet erupted this week after 50 Cent set his sights on T.I. and Tiny, unleashing a wave of commentary that had entertainment circles buzzing from coast to coast. In a bold social media move that nobody saw coming, the mogul teased what he described as an upcoming documentary project centered around the legal controversies that have long shadowed the couple, as if that weren't enough to light up the timeline. That he also threw in a pointed suggestion that the pair might want to get a crisis PR team on speed dial, a remark that sent fans into a full-blown frenzy online. The post spread like wildfire across every major platform, with followers split right down the middle. Some saw it as 50 doing what he does best, speaking an unfiltered truth, while others felt he was simply playing his favorite sport of stirring the entertainment pot for maximum exposure. Either way, the conversation was impossible to ignore, and it arrived at a particularly interesting time given T.I.'s recent media appearances. The Atlanta rap legend had just wrapped a high-profile sit-down with Ebro, Laura, and Rosenberg, where he tackled a range of hot-button topics swirling around the music industry and took a moment to address some of the chatter that had been building around his name. The timing couldn't have been more telling. Around that same window, fellow Southern artist Moneybagg Yo was also making the interview rounds, using the platform to break down his own perspective on the Miss Jackson Records situation and explain how 50 Cent's name became intertwined in the unfolding drama. Just as those interview clips began picking up serious traction online, 50 Cent surfaced with yet another post, one that grabbed immediate attention before it was reportedly taken down shortly after. In the message, he implied that T.I. could soon face pointed questions about the reported legal allegations that had circulated publicly in recent years, and once again floated the idea of crisis PR management while T.I.'s media tour was still in full swing. Brief as it was, the post ignited a fresh round of speculation across social media about the intent behind the timing. Many observers also noted that 50 had referenced a new music release in that same message, leading several fans to connect the dots and conclude that he had likely seen the interview clip making the rounds earlier that day and decided to make his presence known in the conversation.
That's when you need to check your windows and doors, cause he in the lab cooking up destruction. He talking about he got a surviving T.I. and Tiny, doc? Man, that is diabolical. That's cold-blooded. And mentioning the Diddy situation in the same breath, he basically telling T.I., yeah, I'm the one that started the fire.
As the back and forth continued to gain momentum, T.I. used his interview platform to offer some important clarity on the situation. He reportedly explained that certain public reactions from people in his circle had occurred independently, and that he personally had no hand in directing any of those responses. He went on to share that once things began escalating, he stepped in and encouraged everyone around him to take a measured approach and resist the urge to pour more fuel on an already blazing fire. That disclosure did little to cool the debate online, however. Fans remained deeply divided, with one camp insisting that 50 Cent was visibly rattled and operating from a place of frustration, while the other maintained that the whole exchange was simply the modern version of artists checking each other. Nothing more, nothing less. Several media commentators weighed in as well, pointing out that provocative, direct social media posts have essentially become 50 Cent's signature communication style. It is the kind of approach that keeps him relevant in the daily news cycle and ensures that whatever he says gets amplified across every corner of the internet. On the other side of the conversation, those analyzing the situation made it clear that their takes were based purely on an honest read of the facts, not allegiance to either camp. They acknowledged the running joke online that they always seem to defend 50, but pushed back on that narrative by framing him simply as someone who has built a reputation for saying what others won't, without much regard for the consequences. T.I., by contrast, was noted as handling things from a noticeably different angle. According to statements he made publicly, the rap veteran expressed that he views this chapter as largely closed and is far more interested in moving forward. Whether that means channeling his energy into music or simply addressing things in the appropriate setting rather than trading jabs in an endless online loop. The idea of a documentary being constructed around the controversy also drew serious scrutiny from commentators. Many argued that turning what is essentially an unresolved public dispute into a full-length film project could have real consequences for everyone involved, potentially dragging out a conversation that some believe should have already been put to rest. They also took time to remind audiences of a critical detail that often gets lost in the heat of these debates. T.I. has previously faced allegations that received widespread media coverage, yet the legal proceedings associated with those claims were ultimately dismissed. Supporters of the rapper point to that outcome as proof that he engaged with the justice system, navigated the process, and came out the other side with the matters resolved. T.I. himself has spoken openly about those legal battles in past interviews, consistently maintaining that the allegations did not reflect his version of events and that he trusted the court system to arrive at the right conclusion. He has never shied away from addressing the topic directly, which is why many in his corner feel that dragging those matters back into the spotlight through a documentary, especially during an active public beef, crosses a line. Commentators noted that even when issues have been legally resolved, packaging them for a documentary audience has the power to reshape public perception all over again. Viewers watching a produced film rarely have the full picture of what happened in a courtroom, and that gap between legal reality and visual storytelling can lead people to draw conclusions that the facts simply do not support. Several observers argued that when past accusations are strategically reintroduced during a high-profile feud, it risks shifting the entire focus away from the music and the artistry that made these figures cultural giants in the first place. In their view, referencing old, unproven allegations during a back-and-forth between rappers is not the same as scoring a lyrical win. It is a different kind of move entirely, and one that carries far heavier implications. They also drew comparisons to similar controversies that have rippled through the hip-hop world in recent years, including other headline-grabbing feuds and documentary projects, while noting that the accuracy of claims presented in those productions has frequently remained a subject of fierce public debate long after the credits rolled. When the topic of audience bias came up, commentators addressed it head-on. They made it plain that their role in covering these stories is not to pick a winner or carry water for a particular artist. Their goal is simply to offer a fair, grounded perspective in a media environment where fans often expect content creators to take sides. As they put it, the most valuable thing they can bring to a conversation this layered is honesty, even when that honesty is not the most comfortable or popular take to put out there.
And I'm coming back with more gasoline. 50 don't play by the rules, man. Most people, they beef. They go to the studio, they make a little diss track. Not 50. 50 go get a camera crew, a director, and a distribution deal with a network just to ruin your whole month. And look, I love Tip.
Stepping back to look at the bigger picture, the conversation naturally turned to how hip-hop has historically handled conflict, and how dramatically that playbook has changed. For decades, the unwritten rule was that you handled your business through bars. If someone stepped to you, you answered on wax, dropped a record, and let the music speak. The idea of reaching outside that tradition to resurrect legally dismissed allegations as ammunition in a public feud is something that would have been viewed very differently in an earlier era, and that contrast has not gone unnoticed among longtime fans and cultural observers. What has become increasingly clear is that 50 Cent has built his modern-day persona almost entirely on the foundation of social media confrontation. His feed has essentially become its own entertainment network. Part commentary, part provocation, part performance. Fans have come to expect it, and in many ways, it has kept him at the center of the cultural conversation long past the point when many of his peers faded into the background. But commentators also made a point of highlighting what has been noticeably absent from this latest chapter: the music. Unlike the era when rappers would silence their critics with a devastating verse, 50 Cent's current approach leans heavily into online posts and documentary threats, rather than the kind of lyrical warfare that once defined hip-hop's biggest rivalries. For many longtime listeners, that shift has been a quiet but significant talking point. When someone as outspoken as 50 Cent suddenly goes quiet about a specific subject, or conversely leans into it harder than expected, fans treat it like a chess move worth analyzing. In this case, the whispers of a documentary centered on serious allegations involving another artist set off a wave of speculation about what the endgame really was. Commentators took a thoughtful stance on that possibility, reminding their audiences that allegations and convictions are two very different things, and that the entertainment world is littered with examples of high-profile figures who faced accusations that never resulted in any legal finding against them. Turning those moments into documentary content during the heat of a personal rivalry, they argued, raises uncomfortable questions about motive that deserve to be asked openly. The point was made plainly. If a documentary is positioned in the middle of a public beef, viewers cannot help but wonder whether the driving force behind it is genuine accountability or something far more personal. That ambiguity is exactly what makes the situation so layered and so difficult to evaluate from the outside. The commentator also pressed on the issue of timing. Specifically, the decision to hand public platforms to individuals making allegations while a feud between artists is actively burning. In situations like that, the line between raising important social issues and weaponizing personal narratives can blur quickly in the public consciousness, leaving audiences uncertain about what they are actually watching. What most analysts agreed on, however, was that money is unlikely to be the central motivation for either party at this point. Both 50 Cent and T.O.S. are established, financially secure names in the entertainment industry with lengthy legacies behind them. This, by most accounts, is a battle of pride, reputation, and narrative control. Both men have built brands that extend far beyond music, and neither is in a position where they can afford to have their public image take a serious hit. That reality is precisely why the online exchanges have been so heated and why fans remain so invested, because the stakes, at least in terms of legacy and perception, are genuinely high. As the story continued to develop, it became clear that the legal records surrounding T1's situation included an important distinction that observers repeatedly emphasized. The matters in question were civil lawsuits, not criminal charges, and those cases were ultimately dismissed. For those keeping score, that is a detail that significantly changes the context of the conversation, and commentators made sure to flag it as a critical piece of information every time the topic resurfaced in discussion. Boosie also jumped into the middle of the unfolding drama, making his presence felt in the growing public conversation. During a recent discussion, he offered his take on the situation with a clear-eyed observation that once social media enters the equation in a dispute between major artists, the whole thing takes on a life of its own. In his view, the moment posts start circulating, interviews start getting clipped, and fan reactions start stacking up, the original issue almost becomes secondary to the spectacle surrounding it. Every like, repost, and comment thread adds another brick to a structure that quickly towers over whatever started the conversation in the first place.
My bedroom, as you shouldn't have to either. Open up the door to my bedroom for everybody to come in, chime in, and make their opinions about what we do and don't do or should or shouldn't do. But I will say this, whatever we ever have done has been done with consensual adults who into what we into and like what we like. If we want something, we know exactly where to go to get it. We ain't never forced nobody. We ain't never drugged nobody against their will. We ain't never held nobody against their will. We ain't never made nobody do anything. We ain't never trafficked anything.
Boosie did not hold back in his assessment, framing the situation as a vivid example of just how rapidly a narrative can be constructed and consumed in today's entertainment landscape. He pointed out that people watching from the outside, fans scrolling through their timelines at midnight, catching a 30-second clip with no broader context, are often the ones forming the loudest opinions. By the time the full story is available, many have already made up their minds, shaped entirely by headlines and highlight reel moments rather than the complete picture. He was equally direct in contrasting how today's disputes unfold versus how they played out in earlier chapters of hip-hop history. A generation ago, artists settled their differences through records and carefully timed interviews. The cycle was slower, which meant there was more room for context and nuance. Today, a single Instagram caption posted at midnight can reach 10 million people before sunrise and spiral into a trending topic before either artist has even had the chance to respond with any kind of thoughtfulness. Boosie argued that this speed fundamentally changes the game, because artists often find themselves reacting to a story that has already been written for them by the time they open their mouths. He also emphasized that in moments like these, the story stops belonging to the artists and starts belonging to the public. Every interview clip, every social media screenshot, and every reaction video becomes another piece of a puzzle that fans are determined to complete, even when key pieces are still missing. When multiple prominent figures are involved, that dynamic intensifies dramatically. The attention doesn't just add up, it multiplies, and the conversation becomes exponentially harder to steer or contain. For Boosie, the core lesson in all of this was simple but important. The entertainment industry moves at a pace that leaves very little room for nuance, and once a story gains real momentum online, it takes on an energy that even the people at the center of it cannot fully control. What begins as a pointed social media post or a single interview comment can evolve into a weeks-long cultural conversation with its own momentum, its own cast of characters, and its own set of competing narratives. That sentiment was echoed across the wider hip-hop community as more voices entered the fray. Bloggers, podcast hosts, radio personalities, and industry observers all began pulling the story apart from their own angles, each new take adding another layer to what was already a remarkably complex situation. Clips from interviews kept circulating, live streams dissected individual quotes in real time, and social media threads stretched on for what felt like forever as fans cross-referenced old footage and past statements in search of answers. The consensus among media analysts was that the involvement of names as significant as 50 Cent, T.I., and Boosie was a major reason the story refused to cool down. Each one carries a loyal, vocal fanbase that does not sit quietly when their artist is mentioned in a controversial context. Every new comment from any of the three became instant content, instantly clipped, instantly debated, instantly ranked against every other statement made in the ongoing exchange. Radio hosts who weighed in noted that this is now simply the nature of the media cycle. One interview or one post can generate days of programming across dozens of platforms without any single person intending it to go that far. What also emerged from the broader analysis was a pointed observation about how artists navigate reputation in the digital age. The way a public figure responds to criticism, or chooses not to, now speaks volumes in an environment where silence is interpreted just as loudly as words. Whether the vehicle for response is a long-form interview, a carefully crafted social media post, or a brand new project, every move gets scrutinized for subtext, strategy, and timing. Analysts observe that this pressure has fundamentally altered how artists present themselves publicly, knowing that anything they say or do will be dissected by an audience that is always watching. With Boosie's comments in the mix, commentators analyzing the situation, and fresh clips from recent interviews still making the rounds, the conversation showed no signs of slowing down. Hip-hop fans continued to debate the implications of everything that had been said, argued over who handled the situation most effectively, and speculated about where things might go next. Some viewers took the pragmatic view that this is simply what the modern entertainment cycle looks like: fast, loud, and relentless, while others felt the discussion had grown into something far larger and more significant than anyone originally anticipated. At the heart of it all, the central question lingered. In an era where a single post can ignite a cultural firestorm, should these kinds of disputes remain in the music where hip-hop has always done its most powerful speaking? Or has social media permanently rewritten the rules of engagement for artists? The comments sections across platforms were flooded with takes from every direction, which may be the clearest sign yet that this conversation is far from over.